Self-interest, the needs and desires of the self. You. No one had much choice in the matter of their birth, but our lives afterwards are inescapably shaped by the choices we are able to make. How are these choices made? Are they made for ourselves? For others? The circumstances of a person's birth, including their family and environment, have a great effect on how these choices are made. But fundamentally, most people have a natural drive to survive, to exist. To do this, people make choices based on their self-interests. Others around you will do the same, and one can exist with others cooperatively, violently, or by a combination of the two. Cooperative existence tends to expound a win-win, although nothing can be perfect, of course. If a man wants to buy an item that costs, let's say $5, then he wants the item more than the $5, and the procurer of the item wants his $5 more than holding on to his inventory. That's why he's selling it. This exchange involves cooperation, and both are satisfied. A simplistic example, to be sure, but this can be easily used for any exchange situation. Violent existence. One can exist by trying to dominate others through physical force. When one uses physical force, they can take from others what they desire based on their interests. Of course, this is a win-lose situation. This type of existence carries risks. The risks of violence are great, as an act may spur retaliation and start a cycle of violence that may be difficult to end. While the stronger and most violent of a society would inevitably be the best off, the innumerable examples in history of these societies in a seeming static state of strife would appear to make this situation undesirable. A combination of the previous two examples can be called virtuous theft, as there developed a system where this combination appeared to be moral and ethical, to rob from your neighbor for the greater good. Most people prefer to live in some comfort and peace, which can be achieved with mutual exchange. But certain problems in a society, based on the company a person is born into and how they are raised in their environment, caused concern for others who would seek out security. The state, which can be used to describe any societal entity that relies on force and threat to function, as this is the only way it can ensure its existence, came about due to a desire for security, a deluded protection against risk. Most developed societies elect people to their governing bodies. The individuals they elect must spend a certain amount of time telling people what they plan to do about X or Y, and people usually vote for them based on this.
Wenn wir selbst dieses deutsche Volk emporführen durch eigene Arbeit, durch eigenen Fleiß, eigene Entschlossenheit, eigenen Trotz, eigene Beharrlichkeit, dann werden wir wieder emporsteigen, genau wie die Väter einst aus Deutschland nicht Geschenk erhielten, sondern selbst den Schlappen mussten.
I believe we can keep the promise of our founding. The idea that if you're willing to work hard, it doesn't matter who you are, or where you come from, or what you look like, or where you love. It doesn't matter whether you're black or white, or Hispanic, or Asian, or Native American, or young or old, or rich or poor, able, disabled, gay or straight. You can make it here in America if you're willing to try.
Within this system, people still have an inherent desire to survive, and sometimes this desire is perceived as threatened by certain personal hatreds, perceived injustices, irrational greed, and ignorance. This affects a person's voting. Other individuals in the society who vote differently or not at all are subject to their outcomes. There is an inability for an individual to opt out of a society instead of be subject to these outcomes, as their resistance will be met by force. And since personal violence is so risky, it is safer to export this violence to the state. If you want X amount to go to school or to increase your personal comfort, you will vote for the person who says they will do this. The funds needed will be taken from your neighbor by the state, so you won't have to rob them personally. If the money is not available, it will be manufactured, thereby increasing the likelihood for future violence and instability. But who are these people who want to be part of the so-called state? If people are motivated by self-interests, surely it would not exclude these individuals. They desire comfort, security, and survival. Their motivations must also be self-interested. This is why a government cannot exist. It can only function through force, and the people who are part of it have a self-interest to perpetuate and expand it due to their own self-enrichment, obviously at the expense of others. There is something that is actually recognized by many people, but as has been said, self-interest is key to survival. There are many who may rail against the state, but will have no problem gaining from exporting violence to it for their self-enrichment. Alexander Solzhenitsyn. He was a Russian novelist, historian, and very popular critic in the West of the Soviet Union and totalitarianism in general. During World War II, he served in the Red Army, and in 1945 he was in prison for writing derogatory comments about Joseph Stalin and the conduct of the war. He was a recipient of the Nobel Peace Prize in 1970. He was exiled from the Soviet Union in 1974 when the KGB found part of a manuscript for his book, The Gulag Archipelago. One of his better-known writings was Letter to the Soviet Leaders. In this letter, he denounces Marxism, but seems to want to just switch to a different type of dictatorship, mainly that's run by the Russian Church. He also states that the Russian government should be able to keep its power over production, trade and distribution, and foreign relationships, and over the army. But he does say that people should be allowed to speak and write freely. Considering this man is a writer, it is not surprising that he would come to this type of sentiment. It would seem likely that people in some of the other fields that he discusses, such as those in industry, may not want a lot of power over them as well, although this is not in evidence. As once industry is coupled with the government, they too are able to export the violence to the state to be able to strengthen their own position without having to pay for it themselves. Interestingly, if one would support such a powerful government, the ability to speak and write freely would not be able to be maintained. Wilhelm Furtwängler. He was a German conductor and composer. He is considered to be one of the greatest symphonic and operatic conductors of the 20th century. He was a leading conductor to remain in Germany during the Second World War. This decision caused lasting controversy. He did not join the Nazi Party. He never gave the Nazi salute. He considered Hitler a mere street peddler. He was very instrumental in keeping a number of Jewish musicians in the employ of the Berlin Philharmonic Orchestra against numerous wishes to the contrary from the government. He knew many members in the German resistance, and they respected him. He was noted to be deeply affected by the programs against Jews in Germany. He also despised Joseph Goebbels. But the controversy surrounding him remained. Why did he remain in Germany during this time? Why did he not leave? Before and during the war, he was in and out of the country multiple times conducting and could have fled. He was criticized for giving legitimacy to the regime by staying. He stated that he stayed as he felt responsible for German music. Being a man of music and a well-known figure gave him some protection, as the regime regarded him as a national treasure. He was mostly concerned about German culture, specifically music. This was his life. He had to make bargains with the government. And staying in Germany while such a prominent figure at the head of an internationally renowned orchestra could be seen as lending some normalcy to a violent government. Both of these people, out of billions who do the same, acted in self-interest. They were either part of a machine that perpetuated violence while their position was protected, or they escaped it, only to say later that certain things are okay to be controlled to an extent, except those which may be of my profession. What too many of us fail to realize is that not everyone is like us, or does what we do, or may not have a family like we do, or do not. If a man is a cellist, and his life depends on that, he will scream from the mountains to protect this, and likely will not have the energy, time, inclination, or resources to fight other battles as well. In the end, we want to survive. We will do what is in our own individual interest, and these come with many caveats. So, why then should this be passed on in the form of votes to the state, who take this as a mandate to bend others to its will? A discussion cannot be had with a gun in the room, and whenever people say we should do this or that, they are likely meaning that the government should do it, because most people prefer to avoid confrontation. It is easier to export the violence and the theft, and those who want to gain power will know that many people crave security, as well as a sequel to their parents when they become adults. So they will seek out the power of the state and run as a political candidate, ostensibly coming out of the system in a form the same or worse than the one they went into it as, a figure posing as the opposite of what they would promise to fight against.
Obey me and live, or disobey and die. We can coexist, but only on my terms. You will come to defend me with a fervor based upon the most enduring trait in man, self-interest. Get out!
Music making transcended the reality of the day. And I remember how we must have felt humiliated because his Germany was not Nazi Germany. It wasn't this ragged rabble of gangsters, a mob of criminals, a country governed by criminals. I mean, all you'd have to do to achieve the same thing in any other country, in France, England, America, would be to let loose the murderers and choose the cleverest among them and give them power.